Israel relies on Western Islamophobic pretenses to further its foreign policy agenda in delegitimizing Palestinian grievances, leaving the occupied state's colonization unquestioned. It dismisses responsibility for historical crimes committed against Palestinians, such as ethnic cleansing, collective punishment, and apartheid, because the victims of the crimes are either part of a homogeneous group of radicalism or subhuman. If the Palestinians were a Euro-Christian people, we can rest assured the West would not have stood idly by as Israel dropped chemical weapons on Gaza in 2008 and bulldozed over 28,000 Palestinian houses in the last decade. Zionism needs the Western sympathizing countries to remain Islamophobic, despite Netanyahu's plea that it is not Islam, it's the militant Islam. His country continues to benefit from the proliferation of the doctrine. As long as Israel floats in its sea of red Arab Muslim terror, it will remain in perpetual victimhood while simultaneously being a colonial occupying power in Palestine. Islamophobia plays a key role in building and sustaining public and US government backing for Israel. Right-wing Christian and Jewish groups dedicated to denying the fundamental rights of Palestinians deliberately fuel fear of Muslims and Arabs to push their agenda in the Middle East. Unwavering support of Israel policies contributes to the characterization of Muslims and all Arabs as the enemy and to perpetuation of Islamophobia or the failure to speak out against them. A money Islamophobia Israel network bound by ideology, money and overlapping institutional affiliations both furthers a rapidly anti-Islam and anti-Muslim climate in this country and helps bolster the state-sponsored Islamophobic and anti-Palestinian policies adopted and promoted by the US government. In the post-9/11 United States, those who are or who are perceived as Muslims or Arab live in a country driven by the domestic and global war on terror. That war on terror overlaps with the US alliance with Israel. Many within and outside the Jewish community view the United States' focus on war and terror as integral to ensuring Israeli security and maintaining the United States' special relationship with Israel. Islamophobia shapes and is shaped by an interventionist US foreign policy and support for Israeli policies. This view of Muslims as the enemy dates to the 1980s. Until then, Israel's leaders primarily saw Israel's enemy as Arabs and conflated Palestinians and especially the PLO with terrorism. Two major conferences on international terrorism in which Benjamin Netanyahu played a pivotal role illustrate this shift. The first conference, 1979, highlighted state support for international terrorism, particularly from the Soviet Union and Arab states, including backing of the secular PLO, and made almost no references to Muslims or Islam. By the second conference in 1984, which came after the creation of the Islamic Republic of Iran, the Israeli invasion of Lebanon, and the bombing of the US Marine barracks in Beirut, the earlier perception gave way to a new view of Islamic terrorism as central to the Israeli-US view of the enemy, even as it kept anti-Arab racism alive. Well, and for Christians and other non-Muslim Arabs intertwined with Islamophobia. An impetus for the view that Muslims are enemies of Israel and the West came from introduction in 1990 and the subsequent popularization of the term clash of civilization, the idea that Western civilization is locked in an implacable battle with Islam resulting from fundamental cultural differences, history, politics, imperialism, neo-colonialism, struggle over natural resources or other factors. The virulently anti-Muslim clash of civilization concept views more than a billion Muslims as belonging to a monolithic, insular, inherently backward, violent and inferior culture that cannot be changed. It provides an ideological foundation for both the war on terror and the militantly pro-Israel belief that the West must back Israel because of the fear of large Muslim minorities unassimilated and unassimilable. Many funders of the country's most prominent Islamophobes also finance US-based groups that espouse hardline Israeli policies and in some instances back West Bank Israeli settlers. Almost all of these groups spread anti-Muslim, anti-Arab hate through public statements of support for Israeli policies that range from hawkish to staunchly pro-settlers. Among many groups that receive significant financial support from funders of the nation's Islamophobia networks are Stand With Us, which has sued boycott, disinvestment and sanctions, that is called usually BDS supporters, and issued a comic book featuring Captain Israel that depicts Palestinians as vermin, and the Zionist organizations of America, whose leaders are Palestinian, as having a shocking differences in values in America and the West. Such dehumanizing stereotypes are central to both Islamophobia and the right-wing pro-Israel narrative. Anti-Muslim ideologues have Israel right or wrong politics that they push along with their Islamophobic beliefs in the media or college campuses and government settings and at gatherings to advocate the hardline Israeli policies. Pamela Geller, for example, who has instigated anti-Muslim campaign across the US, has written for Uruz Shiva, a media outlet for Israel settler movement. Stephen Emerson, a key member of the Islamophobia network in the United States, has spoken repeatedly about Islamic radicalism. And Daniel Pipes, who focuses on the threat of lawful Islam in the West, supports students' monitoring of professors for their views on Arab-Israeli conflict. Similarly, the Clarion Fund, whose vehemently anti-Muslim pro-Israeli propaganda films have been funded in part of the San Francisco Jewish Community Federation and screened around the community by chapters of national mainstream Jewish organization, links Muslims and Palestinians with Nazis and uses Islamophobia as a rationale for Israeli expansionism. While not involving the hateful logic and language of the anti-Islam, anti-Palestinian ideologues, liberal Islamophobia and anti-Arab racism enable and sometimes foment the targeting of Muslims, Arabs and South Asians. These liberals might support mass construction while promoting or just not protesting government surveillance and infiltration programs that undercut the civil liberties of Muslims and Arab Americans. They might condemn Pamela Geller while perpetuating or failing to challenge the use of anti-Muslim, anti-Arab stereotypes and assumptions to support Israeli policies and repress Palestinians and demonize Muslims and Arabs. In other words, Islamophobia comes not only from people viewed as fringe or from those who commit hate crimes, but also significantly from the mainstream, those with the power of government and other institutions behind them. Many mainstream Jewish groups apply an Israel-related litmus test to Muslims or Arab American groups or individuals in an attempt to identify the good Muslims or Arabs with whom they consider it acceptable to work. This test demands that as a precondition to collaboration with the Jewish group, Muslims or Arab not criticize Israeli policies, publicly denounce anti-Semitism, and publicly dissociate themselves from perhaps condemned groups or individuals that are pro-Palestine or are allegedly linked with Hamas and terrorism. Mahmoud Mamdani, who introduced the good Muslim and bad Muslim concept, says that the central message behind it is that unless proved to be good, every Muslim was presumed to be bad. Muslims and Arab Americans and others have sharply critiqued the good Muslim and bad Muslim paradigm and the Islamophobic assumptions behind it. These critics highlight the right of Muslim Americans to express dissent, even radical or heretical ideas, and condemn the prerequisite to speaking and demand that Muslims and Arab must affirm their loyalty to the United States and Israeli policy before they can even be allowed to speak.